Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. It's another session on the Germinator. For those of you who are new to the Germinator, my name is Alon Eisenstein. I'm assistant professor of teaching here at the School of Engineering at UBC Okanagan campus, which is on the traditional and ceded and ancestral territory of the Seal Okanagan Nation. This is a bi-weekly meeting I've been holding for the last 8 months. I started back in September when we started the academic year. And every 2 weeks, I bring in a guest speaker to talk about different elements of anything relating to entrepreneurship, innovation, and commercialization. I'm really grateful to have Nisha Sehn with us today as the final guest for this academic year series of the Germinator. Before giving you a bit of context about today's guest speaker, I always like to make a point to use the opportunity, especially because most of our guest speakers do come from across over Zoom from anywhere in Canada and hopefully maybe sometime across the world, to give a bit of preview about why this place is what it is, which is the Okanagan. So for context, the UBC Okanagan campus is on the Seal territory, which is in the Valley, Okanagan Valley, in what is known as British Columbia. And one of the things that's interesting about the Okanagan Valley is that it's actually wrongly named. Historically, when the Seal people, and that's the original name, and still the name of the people is the Seal people, first encountered the settlers, they were asked about who they were. And because of translation of the meaning of who versus what, meaning who you are versus what you do, the response was Sukanaken, which was the term used for the area of the valley, but also inferred about the relationship that they had with the community. So there's a bit of backstory about that beyond the capacity of today, but the Seal words, the language is in Sealshin, and the word is actually Sukanaken, which means something like spreading out and connecting to people away. So it's like a central point and a dispatch. So it has a lot of connection about the relationship between not just themselves, but with the land and how they interacted with the land, harvesting medicine and foods across the valley. But our settlers heard Okanagan, and that became the name and kind of embraced over years and years of misnaming this area as Okanagan, as opposed to the actual name, which is Sukanaken. So if you encounter an indigenous name, it's worth kind of pondering where does that name come from, and unfortunately colonialism morphed and distorted a lot of the namings that we take for granted today, and there's a lot of history in that. So going back to today's session, before giving you a bit of preview about Nisha herself, I'm grateful for having Economic Trust of Southern Interior BC for giving some funding to support this ongoing series that allows me to, give some, gratitude, show some gratitude to our guest speakers, but also feed the students who show up in person. So shout out for anybody who shows up in person. I usually bring snacks and drinks. Drinks are over end of term, but snacks are still there. So for next year, if you show up in person, you get fed. So thank you for that funding. And finally, Nisha, I'm not going to read it out loud because it's on the website and it's all fine. But I'm super grateful to have her join us today. We've had several discussions leading up to today's session, and I'm super excited to continue our conversation on sustainability and climate action. And this is kind of where things kind of connected for us. And I think that we have a lot of interesting topics to consider. I'm grateful for the IDS club from UBCO, the Innovate Design Sustain
Yep.
Club, who a few members are joining us today, because I think they would take a lot of this discussion to heart, and hope that it's useful and inspirational for those in attendance. So with that, let me stop sharing my slide and put the spotlight on Nisha. Play spotlight. There we go. Okay. So I guess the way I like to run these sessions is really keeping it light, conversational, informal as much as possible. So just kind of give people some context, and we know not everybody's doing readings before they show up to class. So would you like to give us a quick synopsis of how you ended up moving from Silicon Valley, and I hope everybody got that piece of information, that you had lots of experience working in Silicon Valley. You ended up where you are now, which is in beautiful Victoria, engaged in climate action, through your work. So before we talk about what you do now, how did you end up here?
Well, thank you very much for having me. This is very exciting. I really have enjoyed our conversations in the past, so I was honored to be asked to speak to you all. So I'll try to be brief, but it might not be that brief. I'm originally from the Vancouver area. I grew up in the Lower Mainland, and in high school, I was really good at history and English and music, and that's what I wanted to study. I wanted to be a pianist, and my parents were like, "No, you're going to go study science." And because they were paying for my degree, I was like, I will go study science. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to help people. I knew that I liked problem solving, but I didn't really know exactly what kind of degree to get. And I did realize that I was actually quite terrified of math. I was not the strongest math student in high school, and it really bothered me that I wasn't very good at math. And the only way math made sense to me was in physics. So I applied and got into the University of Calgary's physics program and started doing my degree. And what I was really looking for was a couple of different things. And I kind of knew this at a young age, that I really enjoy figuring out how people problem solve. That's the thing that I was interested in. There wasn't a course for that in school. So I thought, well, what is the opposite of me, a physicist? I'm going to go learn how a physicist looks at problems and how they look at the world. And it was wonderful. It was challenging. My parents kind of raised their eyebrows a little bit when I told them I wanted to study physics. But my argument back to them was, I think an education should be about learning how to think and how to look at problems from different aspects. And I kind of have this instinct. I didn't know what it was, but it's something that I just thought, if I'm going to get an education, it should be something that is going to challenge me completely. So I got my degree in physics. And then my final year, you do these these projects. I'm sure your engineering students are very familiar with doing final projects. And I was focusing on nuclear power, and also land development, projects and how industry impacts water systems, stuff like that. All very interesting. Fast forward, I decided I wanted to go to law school. But I didn't know what I want to study in law. I just knew I wanted to figure out how lawyers thought and how they problem solved and how they make arguments and how they have their own assumptions of the world and their own way of looking at things. And my partner was doing a master's in atmospheric physics and would bring home research. And I started, it was the first time, this is a long time ago now, probably 15 years ago, when I first saw the CO2 emissions hockey stick graph. And that right there clicked. I'm like, I'm going to go learn about the environment. That's what I want to learn, because this is insane. This should be on the cover of every newspaper. Everybody should be talking about it. And nobody was really talking about it. So I got a master's in environmental law and policy, which actually really connected well to my background in physics, because I was able to understand the physics and the science behind climate change, and also then apply it to the policies that were written by different governments and different governing bodies. Then Silicon Valley happened. I was working at the Sierra Club doing nonprofit work and research and campaigns, and my partner got a job as a software engineer. So we moved to San Francisco. And as I was doing this work, I was kind of looking around. Everybody around me was in tech. And I thought, okay, maybe I should go and figure out how to better accelerate solutions for the climate. And because I happened to be in San Francisco and because I had all these resources available to me, I kind of just jumped right in. So I joined Women Who Code. I got a mentor that worked at New Relic who taught me how to program. I started in Ruby on Rails and then just started like acquiring more and more knowledge. And I found a job as like a entry level of software engineer, quickly realized that that wasn't the problem solving I actually enjoyed, even though I was okay at it, and went into project management. And that's where I stayed. I kind of accelerated in technical program management and business operations over the course of a decade. And after about a decade of doing that work and understanding how things are built, understanding how businesses scale, working with investors and boards and different cross-functional teams, I thought, okay, it's been long enough. It's time to come back to climate. And so last year, I decided to leave Silicon Valley and start figuring out how I wanted to work in climate with the skills that I had acquired. That is a very long version of my story.
And capturing 15 years worth of more than.
I did my best. It was 5 minutes.
Okay. Before we I guess we go into the present, I think one of the biggest takeaway that I like to remind students is there is always reality, right? Like the balance of reality is real. And when you have to make choices, again, you started by really passionate about the environment, but you ended up working in software. So it's like you had to kind of let it go or put it on pause or put it on the back burner or whatever metaphor you want to use to do that. But balancing reality is a real thing, right? And maybe for us more mature people compared to our younger student in this online session, was it easy? Was it hard? Like, did you feel like you're betraying your values for working for companies that are not really engaged in climate action? Like, what does this process? I guess it feels rational, but in the moment it's very emotional.
Oh yeah.
So what does that feel like? When you have to, again, your partner got a job, you had to move, you went into the place that's it's not climate centric.
No.
Even though it's in California. Yeah, like how was that experience for you to having to balance all these priorities throughout life?
Well, yeah, you nailed it. I had bills to pay. I needed a job and I wasn't being paid sufficiently in nonprofit because unfortunately nonprofit is lacking resources, which is a huge thing that we can just talk about for hours, but because they were lacking resources. So yes, emotionally speaking, it was at the time, it was hard. It was hard to sit down with myself and think, okay, I might have to go and look at a different field for now because I need a job that pays me to live in a very, very, very expensive city. No matter how much my partner was making, I still wanted to make a really good income. But then there's a couple things I remember making this decision. I made a list. I made a pros and cons list. Everybody makes a pros and cons list. But the biggest thing was, yeah, okay, this isn't the field that I want to be in necessarily, but I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to acquire skills. I'm going to network. I'm still going to keep my passion alive for the climate by keeping in touch with the research and the studies. And I did, right? I was very much still involved in the Sierra Club's climate action. I was a volunteer on the weekends. I still was a part of that community, but then also was like, I'm going to go learn all this stuff that I didn't get the chance to learn in grad school and doing my undergraduate degree, which is like hands-on building things, which I had never done before. People management, which I had never done before. Conflict resolution, I had never done that before. I had never negotiated anything in a professional setting before I got a job in tech, which was a huge learning curve for me as like a woman of color to learn how to negotiate for a salary, negotiate on a project, negotiate for whatever, promotion. So I knew that even though it wasn't the field that I was the most passionate about, I was able to reconcile my feelings by being pragmatic of like, I'm going to learn a lot of things here and I have a lot to offer as well. I'll bring my own perspective to things. I'm a pretty opinionated person. And I can still keep my passion for things alive, which I did. Luckily, I was able to do because I was in an area where climate tech wasn't a thing back then. Now it's an emerging field, which is wonderful. But at the time, it was really nonprofits that were working on climate, not really anybody in technology. So I was able to reconcile my feelings by still kind of keeping my toe in the water with climate, but then also knowing that I was going to benefit a lot from being in an industry that at the time, I didn't realize how it was going to connect into climate. And now it very much is a part of the conversation. So that was kind of a wonderful luck, I guess.
And kind of thinking, maybe connecting it a bit to kind of the theme of the Germinator, thinking about innovation. And I like to remind people that innovation is not about things in particular. Innovation is about creating meaningful change in your surrounding, right? So innovation could be a new product, it could be a new service, but it could also be a new ideology or a new philosophy. But it has to make meaningful change for people's lives around you at scale, beyond, like, it's not just me and my best friend, but it's like me and my thousands of best friends, right?
Yeah.
So if we kind of think back about innovation as a process of change, and the fact that you are very much into and passionate about climate action and climate change, I guess even before you moved into the world of software, did you have a sense that your decision at the individual level were making changes? Was there like a ripple effect that you could see, maybe more localized, not industry-wide, which can take a decade, but we're there for a decade. Like, were there any signs that you and or people that you were working with were making changes from the inside?
Yeah. It's a really good observation about innovation as well, because I think, to go back to what you said earlier, that part you said about scale is incredibly important. And scale happens from a variety of different sources. And one of the ways I think scale exists is by broadening your landscape, understanding the connection between different schools of thought, different ways of looking at things, about questioning assumptions. I think that's where we start really looking at scale appropriately, because, working in Silicon Valley, we talk about innovation all the time, right? And innovation, I mean, there's very few giant disruptors of innovation when it comes to tech. A lot of the changes are really iterative and small and slow moving, and that's okay. We need those things too. But to do system-wide large innovation, it's an issue of scale, and that is connecting the dots between dependencies and systems that kind of work side by side together. Sometimes they completely intersect, and sometimes they're in completely different fields, but there's always some baseline. So there was, to answer your question of like, at the time when I was in software, was there a feeling of change or of innovation or of scale? I think, especially because I was joining Silicon Valley around 2010, 2011. It was after the 2008 sort of crash. Tech was picking up back again. Innovation was a very scary word because they had struggled with a tech kind of crash for a bit, but we're entering another tech boom. So everybody was thinking about innovation, right? How do we differentiate ourselves? How do we build a new product that everyone's going to use? And I was very fortunate that I worked at DocuSign, which was the front runner for electronic signatures, right? And I was also very lucky that I was one of the first couple hundred people to work there. So I got to see it was so interesting because the skills that these really experienced leaders were bringing to the table of how do you innovate the space of electronic signatures, which, like, you have to go to a lawyer's office and sign a piece of paper. Well, now it just goes into your phone and you can just quickly sign it and it's verified and held by a court. That was a big deal. That was a big deal in digitization when we moved into that field. So I got to be like in the front row of watching these leaders innovate and really problem solve something that actually was a very accessible solution too. It helped the planet because you reduced how much paper we used for signing legal things. But also, if you had the internet, you could sign a document. You didn't have to go to a lawyer and pay them. You didn't have to go to a notary, right? It became an accessible solution, which was something that was at the table during those conversations, which I, being 20 something years old, never thought of. I thought, oh, we just help businesses close contracts. That's what we do. No, there were larger, wider implications that these leaders and engineering leaders specifically were looking at, which was, we can make this free version so everybody can use this service. And then we have like the corporate and enterprise versions that bigger companies pay for. But I thought that was a turning point in the way that I thought about innovation, which was, oh, we're just solving a problem of signing papers. Well, no, actually, we're looking at a wider landscape, a connective landscape that this solution can actually provide. And I think that was a big learning lesson when I joined tech, because again, I kind of had to compromise what I was going to be doing for a living for a little while, and I didn't feel great about it. And then when I went into it, I was like, oh, wait, actually, we're kind of helping trees. This is great. We're cutting down, like we would measure that. We would measure our impact of how many trees we didn't cut because of the paper that we saved or something like that. So yeah, that was actually a really big learning point for me when I was in tech.
So before I keep with my train of thought, and you know, from our past discussions, I have so many other questions I can point into, but I do want to give the people in the room and maybe in the virtual room an opportunity to ask any questions based on what we talked about so far. Any questions from people in the room?
I don't have any.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's all right. Boy.
Not at this point.
No?
Not
You guys,
this point,
okay.
yeah.
Anybody online has any question they want to unmute and ask Nisha about the past experience and maybe I guess this interesting connection between digital signatures, I guess saving planets, cutting down trees because you don't need to print the document, but also you're saving on transportation costs because people don't need to waste gasoline to go to the lawyer to do it in person, right? So there's a lot of, again, ripple effect of benefits here.
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of, like, when I was younger and going to school and studying, understanding the connection points between different things was not very clear until I got my hands into the work. And that experience is invaluable, right? And it was a field that I knew nothing about. I didn't know anything about tech, right? I had coded for a year, I interviewed, and I got a job as like an entry-level person. And it wasn't until I was in a company getting my hands dirty, learning about stuff, talking to people, and making a big effort that I realized how connected all of our solutions and how connected innovation actually looks like, what that looks like. And it got, as I moved up the food chain at companies, it became clearer and clearer how decisions were made, right? How business strategies actually created, and really the systemic sort of considerations that happen in a good strategy. And I think that was also invaluable experience as I kind of got higher and higher. The last job I had was, I was chief of staff for the founders at a tech company. That was my last tech job. And my job was strategic operations and planning. So my job was to figure out, where are we going? How are we going to get there? Why are we going there? And making it as an innovative as a roadmap as possible, like a large scale strategy as possible, but then breaking it down into smaller pieces of that iterative innovation that we often hear about. What are the baby steps to get to that big giant goal? And so I think that's the part that I think, if I was to go back to my younger self and be like, no, all of this stuff is connected. It's all like, it's okay that you're getting a law degree. You're not going bananas. Like, it's fine. This is going to connect into the work that you're going to do eventually. It informs and widens your horizons a little bit when you kind of step out of your comfort zone and do something that you might not have thought of doing before. So I thought that was really something I learned.
Excellent. I don't see anybody jumping to ask more questions, so I'll just continue. So where are we now? I mean, so now you started your own business.
Yeah.
You're part of Climatebase. I don't know, where do you see yourself now? Like, what are you trying to do now?
Yeah.
From all that, you know, prologue of how you ended up in Victoria. So
I came back to Canada during the pandemic. I actually lived in Kelowna for 2 years, so I did not reach out during that time. I was still deep into tech, but after moving to Victoria, I decided that it was time to pivot. It was time to get into climate again and see what the landscape looked like again. Like, where are the problems? What needs to be solved? How can I help? And two things kind of happened simultaneously. The first thing is I got into Climatebase's first fellowship, Climate Fellowship, which was really just like the beginning of a networking experience and community experience, which was great because I didn't know what I was missing basically in the climate conversation anymore. And the second thing is I became a certified executive coach, which was something that just like was something that a previous job paid for me to do because I was already doing it. I was already coaching executives. I'm an executive myself, so kind of just worked out. But what's happening lately is first of all, I teach coaching, which was unexpected. I do coach have clients, but the sustainability work became very interesting because I have a lot of experience in building strategic plans and business plans and operations. I'm a business coach now for Project Zero's incubator program that just got kicked off. So I'm going to be starting to work on circular economy programs and initiatives locally. I'm also consulting with different businesses that want to become more sustainable or move to net zero. And so I just finished up, actually, this is my final week with this organization, OnePointFive, that's led by a bunch of like Yale graduates in sustainability. They did this career accelerator for sustainability consultants, really just learning about, how do we get into the nitty-gritty measurements of greenhouse gases with a company, and how do you do a life cycle assessment, like all stuff that you guys have probably learned and talked about, but like at an enhanced level. And then how do you connect that with like inputting it into a business plan? How do you impact change at a business? So that's kind of the next stage of what my business is doing right now, actually, is I'm working with a lot of different clients, looking at their greenhouse gas their carbon footprint, and seeing, okay, here are all the different assessments, materiality assessments, et cetera. But then how do you actually grow or change or enhance your business plan to accommodate sustainability? How do you make your business last for another 100 years, right? So like 20 years ago, every business went through a wave of digitization. Everybody had to have a website. They didn't have a website before. Now they do, right? Sustainability is that new digitization. Every business now has to think about how are they going to sustain their business in light of climate change. And so that's where I focus, is I sit with businesses and business leaders and entrepreneurs on how are you actually going to build a long lasting business that's going to sustain itself and also reduce its emission or become circular over time. And it's been really fun.
Yes. Okay. And we talked about circular economy and business strategy, privately before, but I see already there's one hand raised. So Lakshay, do you want to lead us with some questions?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to make sure, am I audible? Well,
yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think my question is a little bit, just after the different things I've heard. One of the things you mentioned was, I think back in the day when you just started getting into this industry, there was like climate tech wasn't very popular. NGOs did most of the work and stuff like that. So I was really curious how, as someone who's been in this field for so long, you've seen the growth from like the NGOs trying to get into the space to now seeing sustainability become one of the more important things a company looks into. How do you think like a business strategy has, like the business strategy of the company like changes down the years? Like, what are the key elements you feel have either evolved or, like what are the main changes as a student who would later down the line be interested to do something along this space myself, So, yeah.
I mean, that's a great question. So from what I understand, how has business strategy changed over the years to incorporate sustainability, and kind of what are the areas that are kind of ripe for innovation, to be completely honest with you? The first thing is supply chain. Every business is going to have to think about their supply chain. Where are they getting their materials? How are they getting them? Where are they sourcing them from? That is a giant part of the conversation. How do you logistically get things around the world and reducing your carbon footprint, right? Getting off of fossil fuels, for example, not doing, deforestation practices, things like that. So that right there is an actual area that technology can be very helpful in. Actually, there's some really great innovations that are happening in that space of just how do we logistically manage the supply chain and reduce our carbon footprint at the same time. So that's one thing. There's so many wonderful technologies. Like there's the drone technology has taken off in the climate space, which has been really great. There's this company called, I think it's called Drone Seed, which they have drones planting seeds in fields in like parts of Africa where they used to have to pay workers not a very good living fee and instead trained them to do other things instead of planting. And they use technology to take over that part of the work. So then people aren't there in the heat, which is getting worse in parts of Africa, the places that are facing drought. So there's so many areas ripe for innovation with technology. Another one is we absolutely need some sort of shared platform that helps us measure greenhouse gas emissions in a unified way that everybody has access to. We need a platform that is accessible by everybody, so you can punch in numbers on like your different scope 1, 2, 3 activities so that you can get an output of what your greenhouse gas emissions are. We don't have that technology. That is something that would change to be a game changer, really, at this point. Right now, we're all using Excel and Google Sheets. It's not great. So there's many areas in climate tech that are looking for innovative engineering minds, basically, that help bring in all the human-centered activities that we have and be able to put them in a technology where we can actually have insights and analyze and make changes and tweak the formula of how we do things so that our carbon emissions go down. So there's a lot of places. I've seen this happen a lot in business strategies over the years now. And the second thing, actually, the other thing besides the technology is teaching people about sustainability at their companies, right? Having sustainability as a part of their job. That's a skills gap that is definitely something that a lot of organizations, I would definitely encourage you all to look at Microsoft's skills gap analysis of how they're training and bringing in sustainability training and skills to their current employees, their current staff, so that everybody's considering sustainability when they're making decisions at work, when they're doing their projects, when they're conducting their job. That's a huge thing as well. So there's technology aspects to this for sure, that so many places that we can innovate, but then also if you're looking to get a job at a big tech company or whatever it is, any sort of Silicon Valley company, sustainability, especially the big ones, the big companies, sustainability will become a part of your job. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely does. Thank you so much. And a small follow-up, but I'll let Dr. Allen decide. Next question comes from,
Yeah, any other thoughts or questions?
I have one question related to like small versus big business and sustainability. Do you find the interest is mostly with the bigger companies that have more like kind of publicity, or is there a lot of interest from like smaller local companies as well?
That's a great question. So big companies definitely have the resources, they have the money, they have the people power to care, I guess, about the environment. I would point you to a couple of different large companies that are really becoming front runners in the sustainability conversation because they understand they need to incorporate climate change in order to last. Like they want to be around for longer. Microsoft, I already mentioned, they're obviously a big one. IKEA is doing some really interesting, innovative things with their supply chain, with the materials use. Patagonia is an obvious one. Everyone talks about Patagonia. They are doing a great job. Like you only need to buy one thing from Patagonia, you can have it for the rest of your life. Like they will take care of it for you. So there's definitely like larger companies that have money to spare that will invest in sustainability best practices because they can afford to and they want to last longer. They're huge employers. Smaller to mid-sized companies are much trickier. And the way that sustainability consultants go about this is they will go to like a medium-sized company and they'll look at the competitive landscape. Here's what your competitors are doing versus what you're doing. Here's what the benefit is in investing in sustainability, and here's what the cost is, because it is costly actually not investing in sustainability. And there's many arguments to be made. I can give you a whole slide deck on that at some point if you're interested, and like just different talking points if you're talking to a business. But it is more challenging. Smaller businesses, they'll maybe have what we've seen, which is kind of unfortunate, is they'll get like a chief sustainability officer or a VP of sustainability that doesn't have a background in sustainability. They're an executive and they say, you need to take care of sustainability. And that's when we start getting greenwashing. That's where we get people that are not trained in sustainability. They don't have experts coming in on their team. They're not even sure what they're hiring for, because the environmental space, by the way, in the sustainability space is so broad and new. it's kind of the Wild West. And so it's really hard for small and medium businesses to take those risks. So they have to have really informed choices and budget in order to do that. So, you can talk to, for example, like I did a case study on a company that does canopies, like patio canopies made out of sustainable materials. And they wanted to do a greenhouse gas emission. They wanted to do like a report on like their greenhouse gas emissions. So the first thing we did was we looked at their competitors and we said, okay, we're going to try to figure out what is the emissions sort of like the biggest competitor that you deal with. And we're going to compare it to yours with the data you've given us. And we're going to tell you, here's where you can benefit compared to your competitors. Here's where you'll beat them in the race of getting supplies. Or if you change your design, this will improve your market share. It's a little bit more challenging for medium-sized businesses. Smaller businesses, my hope is one day that every business that gets started starts with circular economy best practices. That is my dream for the future, that every business starts off with sustainability in mind. That is not always the case. So a lot of smaller businesses, mom and pop shops, like local retail stores, don't necessarily have a huge like horse in the race. They're really just trying to get debate. It's like usually one owner with a couple of employees, not as big of a footprint as well. But I would say definitely if you're looking for a job, or you're looking for areas that are looking for investment, I would say medium-sized companies, they're pretty good. Depends on what field you're looking at. But the larger companies definitely have the bandwidth and the money.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah. Oh. Amar is in a noisy place. So you have a question in writing. Ooh, where is it? So for the benefit of people in the room, the question is, what is the motivation for businesses to move towards sustainability? Doesn't it lead to increase in costs? Is it to changes in the law regulations, or is it the negative publicity of not moving towards sustainability? And it's interesting that you're basically asking, Amar, about two competing externalities instead of an internal motivation. But what do you think, Nisha? What are you seeing on the ground?
This is the big question. So a lot of businesses don't want to become sustainable because in the short term, yes, they're probably going to lose a little bit, not lose money, but it's going to increase their cost. The longevity of investing in sustainability is actually better for business, right? So there's a couple of things that are external. There are laws and regulation, and laws and regulation and policy are becoming more and more stringent. There's a lot more accountability happening in the field. So that's one thing. If you want to have a business, you're going to have to comply with the laws and the regulations that are coming out right now when it comes to your greenhouse gas emission disclosures. Publicity is definitely another thing. Customer, depending on the business that you're in, but consumer sentiment is changing. People want to know where their things are from. This happened in the food industry years back, where people wanted to know where their produce was grown. Were they using different fertilizers? Like, this is a real thing. Sentiment that's happening in different industries has now changed. So that's another thing, that there is this outside in, the second part of your question of like laws and regulation, definitely. Also, investors are looking for businesses that are going to last a long time and that are going to be able to employ people. The impacts of climate change are variable. One of the big things that businesses need to worry about besides supply chain, so where are their things going to come from, their materials going to come from, where are they going to employ people? That is huge. So as an example, we have lots of tech companies that have call centers in the global south. The global south is being hit the most right now by climate change. How are they going to continue to employ people in the global south if they don't have homes, right? If they're migrating to a different country? Mass migration is on the books. It could happen. So business, it's a risk strategy. It's to mitigate the risk of climate change because we can't predict everything that's going to happen in climate change. This is not just a planet problem, this is a human problem, right? And so in the long run, for the bottom line for a business, it's actually much better to incorporate sustainability best practices and reducing greenhouse gas emissions for the longevity of your business. If you're just looking to make a quick buck, yeah, don't do it. And then you can close shop in like 10 years. But if you're a big player like Microsoft or Apple or IKEA, you want to last for future generations. So you have to consider the changes in the environment, the changes to the working, like the workers sort of group of where you're gonna, who's gonna do the work for you, who's gonna be the labor. So that's a big part of why businesses are beginning to incorporate it more and more. So there's external reasons for sure, which is laws and regulations and, you know, public sentiment. There's also investors. There's also just knowing the unpredictable nature of what climate is going to do and how is that going to impact your business, making that risk assessment and evaluation, and really just having some sort of insurance.
So true. And I want to circle back to the comment that you made, you know, the climate change is actually not a planetary problem, because the planet's going to be fine. It's a human problem. How do we survive in this, right? But I see Anna posted a question, so we'll answer that first, if you don't mind. What is your opinion on companies using HDPE, so high density polyethylene, I assume you mean? So a plastic material for longevity of their structures. Would you say it is beneficial and sustainable? For those who are not familiar with the history of plastics, that exactly is how plastic was promoted as a better sustainable option than trees, because wood will rot and you have to maintain it, and plastic is forever. So we're going back full circle on whether plastic is better than trees, than wood.
It's a big debate. It's a big question, Anna, because it depends on the product. So there was an analysis done. You know how you go to the grocery store and now everybody has a tote bag, like a cloth bag? Used 10 years ago, everybody had plastic bags. That was just what you did. Sometimes paper if the grocery store was fancy, but usually it was just plastic bags. So there was an analysis done on the greenhouse gas impact of cloth versus plastic bags. And plastic bags, they are, what was the word? So the numbers almost kind of evened out, which was kind of surprising to the analysts, because in order for, I think it was like within a year, if you had X number of grocery trips, the amount of water and processing it took to make the cloth bag it had more carbon emissions, I guess, for the year than the plastic one, which was also reusable, because the amount of water and environmental impact to make the plastic bag was not as high. But the end of life of the cloth bag compared to the plastic bag looked very different. A cloth bag can be torn up and reused again, but a plastic bag, it's not as easy because of the chemical composition of polyethylene. Like it's very complex, and there's different types of plastic as well. So it was, for breaking down, the plastic material was actually worse for the environment because it sat in the landfill and didn't go back into the planet. Whereas the cloth bag could be reused, even though it took more resources and greenhouse gas emissions to make the cloth bag. So that is the debate. And it really is about the product that you're building, whether it's like an actual structure, like, for example, cars, right? Like, I mean, you're not gonna make a car out of paper, but there's different materials that we can make of a car where we use plastic or different metals or different compositions of different materials. You have to look at the entire life cycle of the product, I think, to know which one's going to be a better choice in the long run and which can be reused again. And that's where circular economies actually come in to the conversation more and more about plastics, because plastics are not made really to be circular. It's there, and plastics are not all the same. That's the part that I think that is very, very hard. Plastics have all sorts of different kind of compositions depending on what the product is and how it's being used. So we recycle plastics. What does that even mean? There's a whole debate that can be made about what we're recycling, how effective it actually is, compared to upcycling or reusing or repurposing materials. So there's no clear answer on which one is better, but I would say that not all solutions are going to be homogeneous. You can't have just plastic all the way or paper all the way. I think it really depends on what you're using it for and what your intention for the product is. Sorry if that wasn't satisfactory. It was I could do an analysis for you if you'd like. I can make a spreadsheet and give you all the emissions, but yeah.
I think that's part of reality, right? Like there's no absolute yes or no, true or false, right? It's the world is filled with nuances, and that's kind of part of life, right?
Yeah.
But I wanna circle back about the comment you made about the human part of the problem of climate. Now, I've been in the entrepreneurship scene for probably getting close to, well, a decade and a half now. And hearing so many stories about the fact that the technological and scientific solutions for the problems we're seeing now at scale have been around at least 50 years.
Yeah.
Like decomposable plastic was invented, the earliest I know of was in the 70s.
Yeah.
Right? So it's been 50 years. So the science was there, the technology was there. And I think we have scientists and engineers mostly in the room, right? Yes. And probably the biggest fallacy of the debate is we need technological solutions. So and we chatted a lot about the book, The Donut Economics. And we, I think I mentioned a few times, Braiding Sweetgrass is another great book for people to look into. And the thing about, again, these two books is they really put the emphasis on the people.
Yeah.
Right? Not the technology. The technology is already kind of taken for granted. The scientific knowledge, whether it's Western scientific knowledge or even more impressively indigenous scientific knowledge, has been around. If we give credit to indigenous peoples and cultures across the world, this knowledge has been around for thousands of years. What do we need to do? Like, how do you, like you said, you said like we need to connect the dots.
Yeah.
So technology is there, science is there, people are starting to go there, I hope. But what can we do? What is missing to help people connect the dot across technology, science, individuals, companies, economies? It's a big question.
Big question. How much time do we have
The
left?
problem of the world, please, in 10 minutes or less.
Well, okay, yes. So we've had the technology and the science for a very long time. And the way I look at technology in particular is that it's a tool. It's a tool in our tool belt. We have a lot of different tools. So technology is one, science is one. I think like policy is definitely another one. Political will, political movement is one, which is a huge one in my opinion. I think that's one of the biggest blockers of enforcing change. Entrepreneurship and innovation is another one, right? How do we buy things? What do we buy? What do we value as a society? And I agree completely that indigenous practices have been around for so long that we're now finally paying attention and looking at how they've been doing for so long. We're now looking at nature-based solutions, right? To help us capture carbon out of the air, like from seaweed. Like we have so many different solutions. And like you said, is how do we connect the dots? So here's what I think. I think we need everyone. I think everybody has a skill set. They have something to offer. We need everyone anyways. In the next 10 years, there was a report that came out from Project Drawdown. In the next 10 years, every job is going to be climate adjacent. It's going to have to be. Otherwise, what are we doing? So every perspective, every skill set is absolutely needed. Whether you're a scientist, an artist, a writer, a musician, it doesn't matter. Everything in some way is going to touch sustainability or climate. It's going to have to. So what I think is missing with connecting the dots is, and I don't know how controversial or hot take this is, but get out of your comfort zone. Like, get your education, do all the things that you think you need to do, but also read different kinds of books, meet different kinds of people if it's possible. If it's possible, travel. right? Go and be a part of different communities, eat different kinds of food, get different perspectives. That helps broaden your worldview, and it helps you connect the dots, helps you notice things that are not necessarily in your world. Like when I graduated high school, I was in a very little bubble of my life, and that was fine. That was just my little bubble. Then I went to university and I met different kinds of people. And then I went across the world to go to grad school. I was very lucky that I could do that. I know I have a lot of privilege. So like within your privilege, whatever you can do to connect, to broaden your landscape and your horizons on things. It helps you find different areas that you can connect your interests or your skills to. I didn't know what I was going to do with my physics degree. All I knew is that I wanted to learn how a physicist thought for 4 years. That's what I wanted. I wanted to learn how to problem solve like a physicist, even though I was never going to be a physicist. I ended up going to law school. I knew that I wasn't actually going to be a lawyer, but I wanted to know how laws were made. And I wanted to see, do those connect? Are those related? Kind of. They kind of enforce each other, inform each other. And there's different ways. That's where I think creativity and innovation actually happens, is in those cross sections, right? Like where things kind of meet, but you're not sure where they meet. Oh my gosh, like you all are brilliant. I'm sure that all of you could look at cross sections between different systems or schools of thought and find something that have in common and see if there's a solution there or something that's interesting to play with. That's what I think is missing, is that I think human beings are clever. Let's use our imaginations. Let's get a little bit braver of getting out of our comfort zones. And once we start thinking and looking at different perspectives and different lenses, we start getting rid of our baseline assumptions of the world and we start seeing it more openly. And I think that's when those different schools of thought meet in your experiences where creativity really happens. And I think that's going to be the change, because then we have more empathy for each other, right? We see each other better. We know each other. We know how to have conversations with each other. We appreciate each other's cultures or ways of thinking. And I think that's going to be giving us more creative solutions and more connectivity and collaboration. That's my very maybe naive way of thinking of things, but I find like the best work I've ever done is working with somebody that thinks completely different than me. And then I have to sit down with them and like solve a problem with them. And I'm like, how are we going to do this? And that's where I think my most favorite projects have been.
Excellent. We still have a few minutes to spare.
Oh, nice.
Fabian, please.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Nisha, for sharing your experience. Very exciting and informative information. I have a couple of questions. I mean, one question, but in a couple of sections related to coaching.
Sure.
Actually, would like to ask, what do you think about coaching in terms of like assigning a portion of your time in coaching and business? How much coaching takes your time, but not that like real time. I mean, you consider 20 hours, but it's occupied in your mind. And when you calculate it, you find that it's already 40 or 60 hours spent to that. And also, if you want to share one or two of the most challenging experience you had in coaching, doesn't matter, either both executive or in business, what would you like to share? Like which one was more challenging and how you could deal with that?
Oh, wow. So coaching. So I accidentally became a coach. Full disclosure, that was not part of my career plan. It happened upon me because I was already doing it at work. And then I got recruited into a coaching program. And now I'm a faculty coach at Berkeley. So that was a complete side shift. But coaching takes up the majority of my time because I coach in everything I do. I use my coaching skills literally in everything. So it's not just with executives and entrepreneurs and business people. I use my coaching skills, I should say, in my personal relationships. I have become a much better listener. I hope, I ask much better questions, right? I have learned to give space to people when I didn't want to give space to them before, right? I've let go of judgment in a lot of the things that I do now, because what I've learned from coaching and why I think it's so powerful is that it allows you to give space to people to share their ideas, to be vulnerable. It's not therapy, it's very different. Whereas like I don't give, we don't go into their past, but we say, well, what do you want to do with this excitement that you have, or this plan that you have, or this vision that you have? How do you want to get there? And I'm genuinely curious about it. So I find that coaching actually just kind of seeps into most of the things that I do. It's just part of the services I offer when I do consulting work as well. But I have a separate coaching practice that are specifically for individuals and groups that just want to like do leadership coaching or do executive coaching, right? So they enhance their skill set. I know we only have 2 minutes left, but I think no problem. I think the most challenging coaching I've ever done is when somebody's value set is very, very different from mine. Like almost completely opposite. And I have to hold space and be empathetic and let them be vulnerable without judging them. And that can be really hard. It can be really, really hard. Because I want to tell them to change their mind, but that's not my job at that time. I have to be okay with not being okay with what they're saying. And the challenging part actually in that whole encounter is being okay afterwards. When I end the call or the session and they go off with their day, now I'm sitting here with a bunch of feelings and I'm like, I really wish I didn't have to coach this person, but at the same time, like, but I really do think I'm going to learn something here, and processing my own feelings and coming down off of that emotional trigger of like, and so there's a lot of things that I do as a coach and most coaches do, which is grounding, breathing, taking care of ourselves, because coaching is a very much a giving role. You are giving a lot to people. You're giving them your time and your attention and your care. And it's something I take very, very seriously. So yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted, but it's very, very rewarding. And I can't believe I never thought of it as a career choice until I kind of stumbled into it. So yeah, that's what's been happening there.
Thank you. And a quick question. If you have any like book or movie or documentary or whatever made you interested into coaching and you found yourself in coaching career, or any book that you would love to review and change your mindset and vision toward coaching, what's that? So would you mind to share?
You know what? I have one book here that I am starting to dig more into. It's called The Ecological and Climate Conscious Coaching. And it's specifically on climate coaching and how you help people with climate anxiety, moving into the climate space. I haven't finished it, but that's one that I want to finish and then actually probably write some thoughts on. That is my current project right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it is 1 o'clock, so we are at time, and I'm really, really grateful that you made time for us and sharing your insight, your experience, your history, your evolution. And I know that we're going to see each other in the future, definitely. And I also know that the Germinator will stay here for next year. We're going to go on a break for the summer, but I will restart this come September. So I think I would definitely like to see the Germinator opening the space in a more proactive and explicit way, being sustainable focused and climate focused, not just as a like one of other things, but like as a dominant narrative for everything that we talk about in a more explicit, deliberate way. So happy to chat about how we do that well with you, hopefully throughout the summer. And thank you for everybody who joined us in person and virtually. And a recording of this will be posted on my website, and feel free to reach out to me. And I'm assuming Nisha is happy to get reached out to. You can find us online, use your research skills, which you all should have because you're students. So I don't give it out, do your own research and find us if you're interested to connect. So for now, be well. I guess be curious and be climate active, because we all need to, like you said, Nisha. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye, everyone.